was never supposed to be a doctor or go to medical school. And I was told from a pretty young age that I couldn't be. In 6th grade, I remember because it was during the O.J. Simpson trial, and I was cutting a bagel, and I made the unfortunate decision not to take my finger out of the middle of the bagel as I was cutting it. This lovely scar here. So my finger was spurting blood, and my mom, who was a nurse before she became a lawyer, was doing everything she could to control the bleeding while mentioning that our kitchen was turning into the Simpson crime scene. And she's trying to hold my bleeding finger over the sink. In the meantime, I'm getting understandably queasy watching myself bleed out all over the kitchen. And so I'm begging her for a chair. My father is nowhere to be found because he can't stand blood either. And so I'm begging for a chair, getting nauseated and needing to sit down while she's trying to control the bleeding. She takes me to the emergency room. I get 7 stitches. I don't look at it at all the entire time because it makes me feel like I'm going to vomit every time I do. And from then on, I think my parents and I had this mutual understanding that I was not good with blood. And I was great at science, and they were really encouraging to me otherwise, but it was just understood that that was a barrier to the practice of medicine that I probably couldn't overcome. So I go to undergrad. I still love science. I actually went to a math and science magnet school for high school, and I still love science. I major in biochemistry, where I'm surrounded by pre-medical students who are always talking about, how they're going to practice medicine and go, save everyone everywhere. And I responded to that by talking about how it would be bad if I were, in medicine because I would probably faint into the patient in the operating room. I'd really internalized this fact that I was not good with blood. My mom went to law school when I was in elementary school, so I had always sort of had the practice of law in my mind because there was a blueprint for that in my family. And so even though I love science, I decided that I would go to law school. And the 3 summers that I was in undergrad, I worked in a patent law firm because I thought it was a great intersection of science and law, and what a great combination of my 2 interests. I love writing, so I thought law school would be great, and I did all the stuff you do if you're pre-law in undergrad, in addition to the biochem stuff. And my senior year, I just sort of felt like I had gone through all the motions to become an attorney, but not really considered what that meant for me in terms of my happiness or interests. And so I decided to do Teach for America. I heard it was this amazing program, and I thought, cool, teach science to kids, and it'll be awesome. And it was. And I think within the first week or month of my teaching, I knew that I could never go back to being an attorney because I had been in an office for 3 summers writing about science, and here I was doing it in a small scale, and I knew that I could never go back to being in an office. So I started to have to think about what I wanted to do with my life. And I remembered that, I had these students, they were constantly banging themselves up. High schoolers are not any more coordinated than baby giraffes. So, constantly dressing someone was barfing in class. I had a student that, fainted. I had to call 911. It was, there was something, it was a mile a minute, but it made me realize that in fact, other people's blood is very different from my blood. And I could handle that. And so I sort of quietly went about laying the groundwork to consider medical school, but I wasn't really ready to tell my parents because they'd paid for my LSAT class. So, so I was like, all right, I'll see how this goes. I took a practice MCAT. It went okay, and I thought, well, I'll take a class and it'll be all right. And so I decided I was going to need to tell my parents at some point that I wasn't going to law school. And so I was underwear shopping with my mother. And I pick up this polka dot lacy bra, and I turn to her and I say, would it be so bad if I wanted to go to medical school? And I think my mom was pretty shocked, not only because of the message, but because of where I had chosen to deliver it. I'm super great at choosing my moments for big news. My parents are amazing, and they got behind me 100%. They were like, but aren't you afraid of blood? And I was like, actually, I think it's other people's blood that I can deal with than my own that I have a problem with. And they're like, okay, we can get behind that. And so I took the MCAT, and I took the pre-med courses. I needed an English course because I hadn't been pre-med at Wellesley, so I took that at Carolina over a summer, and I got a job as a medical assistant while I was applying to med school. And December 3rd, 2007, Frank Church called me, the best phone call of my life, to tell me that I had been accepted into UNC School of Medicine. And I called my parents. I was so excited. My dad picked up the phone, and I said, Dad, I'm going to be a doctor. And he said, you need a doctor? said, no, I'm going to be a doctor. He said, do I need to call 911? Like, what's wrong? And I said, no, I've been accepted into medical school. I am going to be a doctor. And of course they were, they celebrated with me. They were very excited. But I think that response was sort of indicative of their attitude towards my journey towards medical school in general. Like, they just were, it was sort of like, okay, she's doing that. We'll see how it goes, It's just hard when you've been on a path for 20-something years and all of a sudden you switch gears. And I had a hard time believing it too, I think, at some point. So I started medical school, and I still had these moments where my parents were a little bit incredulous about this path that I was on. Like, I would call just to say hi, and I would have done some shadowing somewhere in the hospital. Oh, hey, I'm just leaving the ED. You're in the ED? What's wrong? Like, and I sort of had to explain that, like, if you're going to be a doctor, you're going to be around the hospital, and we need to get used to that. So I got, the white coat ceremony happened, and my parents came, and they saw me put on the white coat, and my mom said afterwards, oh my gosh, you guys put on those white coats, and you kind of look like doctors. Good idea. And my dad, who's very funny, both my parents were pretty funny, but my dad, who's very funny, always would call me when I was, studying for hard tests, and he would say, I read the science section of the New York Times, so if you have a question on Tuesdays, I can usually help you. He still does that. But so my parents live in Asheville. They moved there while I was an undergrad, and I decided when I was figuring out where I wanted to do my community week that I would do it in Asheville because I could stay with my parents for a week, a couple times a year and see patients, yes, and remember why I was doing all the other stuff we have to do first and second year. No offense, Dr. Carney. And my, they were just sort of amused when I would like have my white coat and stethoscope. It was sort of like, oh, that's so cute. She's playing doctor. And my very last community week was, towards the end of second year, and we are members of a synagogue in Nashville, and a congregant had invited us to her home for a lovely meal, and so I went with my parents to this was a Sunday night right before the community week was going to start, and so we went to this beautiful home. It was like this California ranch style home, immaculately decorated, and this congregant was like a known vegetarian cook, just a fabulous cook. And so we got there, and we're all eating these like awesome little yellow crackers that she had made, and she brings out this meal, and it's in these bento boxes that are just, it's like this Japanese-inspired vegetarian meal, very beautiful. And so as we're eating these crackers, my dad is like halfway through the meal. My dad is like eating one of the crackers, and he goes, oh, by the way, what are these? And I will preface this by saying that my family is of Ashkenazi Jewish ancestry, and we are not known for our gastric fortitude. And so we are like eating these crackers by the handful because they like taste so good and everything is so good. And so my dad picks up a cracker and he's like, good cracker. He's like, by the way, what are these? And the hostess says, oh, they're dehydrated onion and flax. And my dad gives me this like bug-eyed up look like we are all in trouble. So everybody else has been really classy. Mine is gonna go south pretty quickly. Like as the meal is progressing, everybody's getting like the rumbles and a little bit of the sweats, and it's going not well. So we like, and they just like draw the meal out, and we're like, God, when are we gonna get out of here? And so we all sit and we're eating. We're done eating and we're like sitting in the living room and we're all like on the couch like, please God, let us leave soon. So we make our excuses, we get out, and my dad, who was a classy gentleman, as we get to the car says, oh my God, thank God we got out there. I was gonna blow a hole in their couch. We make it to the car, we have kind of a good chuckle on the car ride home, and we get home and we go to bed. I'm all excited, community week, patients, yay. I go to bed, and like around midnight I hear this groaning from downstairs, like ugh, and I'm like, I'm gonna ignore that and go back to sleep. And then I hear this like strangled cry from downstairs, which is, somebody help me. And it is my father, who is a middle-aged gentleman, and I was like a second year in medical school. My middle-aged father gets up in the middle of the night and says, somebody help me. I am sure he is having an MI. So I run downstairs. He's in this like little hall bathroom because he was trying not to wake my mother up, and I knock on the door. I'm like, Dad, are you okay? Are you having chest pain? So I think Dr. Dr. Charles was saying something about like cognitively smart, functionally useless, and I think I can check that box at this point. So I said, are you having chest pain? And my dad, who is funny even in times of crisis, said, if I am having chest pain, it is awfully close to my ass. In the meantime, my poor mother has spoken because of the ruckus, and she comes out, oh, your father, you know, he's just never good with any kind of discomfort. And then as she's looking at me, she says, she like holds on to a chair, and she says, you know what, actually, I don't feel that great. And she faints dead away on the floor. So my dad is in the bathroom right around the corner with the door closed, and he goes, what happened? What happened? Because he hears the thud. And all I know is, okay, first check to see if the patient is responsive. Mom. The longest, you know, probably 2 seconds of my life. And she wakes up, and she said, I was just tired. I fell asleep standing up. Jewish mothers in denial. And if you've ever tried to treat a patient who doesn't want to be treated, I will tell you it is nothing compared to your mother who does not want to be treated. And I was like, Mom, you passed out. And my mom goes, no, I didn't. I was just sleepy. And my dad, from around the corner with the door closed, yells, yes, you did, Randy. I heard it. And so I tried to, she's like, no, I'm fine. I was like, really? We need to go to the emergency room. Like, you may have hit your head. I'm very concerned. No, I'm fine. Meddling daughter in medical school thinks she knows everything. Leave me alone. So I make her at least, like sit, and she's like, no, I'm just going to go back to bed. I'm just going to go to bed. And, like, all I could do from second year medical school brain was like, I know she shouldn't get up right away. And so I got in her face and I said, you passed out. I am in charge now. And so I made her sit for a while. That was the best I could do. She got into bed. She was so irritated with me because I kept, trying to figure out. And she had some blood on her sleeve. I rolled up her sleeve, and she said, "It's just dry skin." And she has like an orange on her elbow where she had taken most of the fall. And it was, she could move it. She didn't feel like she was hurting because it was just dry skin. And so she let me dress it, but she was really irritated with me. And I was like, we really need to go to the ED. I'm like, worried you hit your head. And no, that was not happening. And so instead, I woke her up every 5 to 10 minutes for the next 3 hours because I was worried she had a head injury with like a lucid interval. And I was so worried she was going to slip into a coma overnight. And she was not pleased with that either. So I did that, and then finally I was like, I can only do so much, and I went to bed, and she woke up the next day. She was okay, and I talked her in to go to her family doc. She just had some blood pressure side effects from medication she was taking, and she ended up being fine. But fast forward to a couple of years later, and she cut her finger, actually, and she asked me if I could sew it up. So it's gone from like her not wanting to listen to me about going to the ER when she has a head injury to like her cutting her finger and wanting me to sew it up at home. And I was like, well, a couple of problems. Number 1, no suture. Number 2, no anesthesia. Number 3, no medical license. Setting aside the fact that you're my mother and I shouldn't be treating you. So I think that it's all. It was just a wild night, and I think it was sort of a watershed moment in this shift between, like, in a power dynamic where, I didn't know a lot, but I knew more than anybody else that was around, and that was all I had to go on. And I think my mom used to call me, when she would see me with my white coat and my stethoscope in the first 2 years of medical school, she would call me her little Dr. Wannabe. And I took issue with that, and finally, around the same time that this incident happened, I said, no, not Dr. Wannabe, Dr. Gonnabe. Like, someone has said that I am going to medical school and going to be a doctor. And I think everybody has times where you feel like a fake doctor, or you feel like you're an imposter in medical school. And I certainly had that. It turns out I think my parents had that too. They've come around. And I'm graduating in 2 weeks, and I'm pretty stoked. So.